Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to this short session for 30 minutes. Tim Baker's my name, and I hope you're staying positive during all of this COVID stuff that we're going through. So what I want to do now is just talk about a really interesting topic around accountability. And I think a lot of leaders struggle with it, with getting employees or team members to take accountability. And I find this happens all over the world, regardless of culture and industry. So I want to sort of shed some light on three ways that you can give people greater accountability for the work that they do, and talk about a broader picture around what I call the proactive paradox, which is partly the title of my latest book, Breaking the Proactive Paradox, Maximizing Performance Through Empowerment. So I'll talk about this proactive paradox, and then I want to get into a little, some very practical things that you can do that will help you to get that accountability that we're all hoping for with our people. All right, so let me put my screen up again, and then we'll launch into it. And just for those that don't know me, and I know we've got a very loyal group of followers that join every week, so forgive me for repeating the same information. But for those of you who don't know me, Tim Baker, I am obviously an author, and I am just working on book number 12 right now, which is all about feedback. And obviously, Breaking the Proactive Paradox is one of my books. You can see that I give keynote addresses, I run workshops, I do executive coaching, and I've been doing this for 20 years, worked in 13 countries around the world, and thoroughly enjoy what I do. Obviously, a lot of my work now is online, like a lot of people. I also play rugby in the Golden Oldies competition in Brisbane, and we play every 2 weeks to recover at my age. So it's obviously a social thing more than anything else. All right, let's launch into it. Now, an obvious objection or comment, and perhaps one of the reasons that you're here, is that how do I get my team to be accountable for the work that they do? So how do you do that? It's a little tricky. It's not just a case of telling them that they need to be accountable. Obviously, that doesn't work. So let's talk about that in a bit of detail. I want to actually talk about the proactive paradox to start with. What is the proactive paradox? It's a label I put on behavior that you will see is very familiar. I want to talk about the 3 strategies for building accountability that I promised. And I've got a special offer at the end of the presentation if you would like to take that up. All right, so when we talk about paradox, when we talk about the word paradox, and we probably overuse it a little bit, it's ultimately, there's a number of different definitions for it, but one of the interesting parts of paradox is what comes first. And the best way to describe that is the chicken and the egg. So does the chicken come first or does the egg come first? And that's a paradox. So obviously that's almost impossible to answer. And the proactive paradox in the employment relationship is a little similar. So let me talk about that for a moment. So the proactive paradox is a very simple concept, and let me just explain how it works. At the outset, so let's say you're the leader of a team, and you're a new leader to a team, and you've got a new team, and the team are all ready to go. Basically, you and the team are on the same page, usually at the beginning. So in other words, what you want is you want your team members to show initiative. Prudent initiative, obviously. You don't want them to be just going off and doing whatever they want to do, but you do want them to do that. But also, the team members also want to exercise autonomy as well in the work they do. They don't want to be micromanaged. So everybody's on the same page to start with. You want your people to show accountability and to, display prudent initiative. And of course, they want to be autonomous as well. Then something very strange happens, and you may decide that you're in a team meeting and you actually invite your team members to show initiative in the right place at the right time. So you basically make it very clear to people that that's what you want them to do. Now, while you do that, everybody's sitting there around a table or perhaps online and they're listening, but what they're thinking in their mind is, I'm not really sure whether Fred or Mary really wants me to show initiative. I'm not convinced that they do. So what happens is they sit on their hands, so to speak, so they don't actually jump in and take accountability and show initiative because they're not quite sure whether you really mean what you say. So as it goes for a week or two after you've made that announcement in your team meeting, you notice that nobody's being accountable. Nobody is jumping in and showing initiative, which is very disheartening for you. And you think to yourself, well, if people aren't going to show initiative, then I'm going to jump in and do what we need to do, because obviously we've got to get the product out the door or the service. So I'm going to jump in and do those things that I really wish that other people would be doing. Now, while you do that, everybody in your team watches you and they notice that you're jumping in doing these things. And in their mind, they think, aha, I knew she or he didn't really want to show initiative. I want us to show initiative, because if they really did, why would they be jumping in and doing the work that we should be doing? You see, so it's a chicken and the egg situation. And what happens is because you fill the void, you have confirmed in their mind that you don't really want them to show initiative. So it's a paradox, and it actually reinforces their initial suspicion about whether you were serious about that or not. So that's the paradox. And there's basically three particular steps in that process. The first step is that everybody's on the same page. So you agree that people should be accountable, and they agree as well. That's your team. So everybody's fine to start with. And then, of course, people are skeptical about whether you really mean that, so they don't do anything. And then once you jump in and fill the vacuum that's been left vacant by those not showing accountability, it confirms in their mind that you weren't serious after all. So that's what I call the proactive paradox. Now, in my book, I talk about 4 different strategies that you can use to break the proactive paradox. And I go into great detail about these 4 strategies, and I don't have time to do that today. But ultimately, under each of these strategies, there are a range of things that you can do which can break that paradox that I mentioned. Now, I will mention, of course, 3 of those today, but you've got 4 different strategies that you can apply. And obviously, you can read more about that later. One strategy that I strongly recommend that you consider is that next time you have a team meeting, instead of just telling people that you want them to show initiative and take accountability, which is just rhetoric at the end of the day, what I suggest you do is, if you've got a whiteboard, or you can still do this online, you basically draw 3 columns on the whiteboard. So 1 column, 2 columns, 3 columns. In the column on the left-hand side, you put the heading decisions that need to follow a process. Okay. In the middle column, you will label that decisions that can either follow a process or you can show initiative. So this is a choice that people have got. No, I can follow the system, or I could actually go out of my way and show initiative. And then the 3rd column on the right-hand side is decisions where initiative is expected. So this is where there isn't any process. These are unique circumstances, and people are expected to basically show independent judgment and make decisions without, following a system. Now, once I've got these three columns there, I want to start a conversation with my team members about some things that we do in our workplace that might fall into those three categories. So I'll actually start with the yellow one. I'll start with the one on the left-hand side, and I'll say, okay, tell us all the things that we do in our team where we have to actually follow systems and processes. Now, you'll find that's the easy one to start with because there's always things that have to be followed. So there'll be things around safety, there'll be things around regulation, there'll be things around a whole bunch of things there that need to be done. So you can put all of those things into the list and just keep asking until you can build up a number of things. So when you've done that, you move then to the far right-hand column. And the idea is on the far right-hand column, you then ask people to identify things that they do in their work where they actually need to show initiative, things that aren't normally a process. Now, you're going to find this a bit more difficult because people often aren't quite sure about these things, and that's the whole reason that you do that. So try and get a couple of examples of that. So for example, it might be dealing with a customer where they have quite an unusual request that isn't normal due process. So whatever it might be, you make a list of those things on the right-hand side. Now, then we go to the middle column. Now, the middle column is where it can go either way. These are decisions that can be made by a process or follow initiative. And again, see if you can get a couple of examples there. Now, just by doing that example, just by doing this exercise, what you're actually doing is getting people to think about their work and where they should be showing accountability. So that can be quite useful because people might be sitting there quietly. They may not say too much, but they can see clearly that, yes, there are things that have to follow a process. So those things aren't the issue here because most people do that anyway. But the things in the orange column, people now know that it's okay to go ahead and use their independent judgment in those situations. And of course, where the problem is in the middle column, because what happens if people have got a choice between showing their initiative and following a system, they will normally default to following the system, won't they? And the reason they do that is it's safer. Anything goes wrong, they can always blame the system. So you see, so that becomes, it sort of gives them a license to think, well, hang on a minute, I don't have to necessarily follow a system. So give it a shot. It's certainly worth trying, and it's certainly a good way for clarifying in the minds of your team members where you expect them to show initiative and when they need to follow a system. Okay, now another process that you can use is something that the military use, and I'm sure you've heard of it. It's an after-action review. Now, if you're working in a project-based environment, or you've got anything where a process or a procedure has to be followed, at the end of the project, whatever that might be, and it could be anything. So this is very applicable for anything where there's a finite start and finish in anything. So when you finish the project, before you launch into the next one, and I know we're all busy, and this is one of my big bugbears, that I think what happens is that we're too busy to review or debrief on what we've done. And we're missing a wonderful opportunity to be able to foster accountability. So what I would do at the end of a project, I'd get my team together, and this exercise really probably takes 10 minutes. And what I do is I'm going to ask 3 basic questions around the project. So basically an after-action review is a fancy name for a debrief. So my first question to the team is, what did we do well? Now, even if it was a disaster, there's always something that went well. So, keep asking until, so why do we start with what went well? Because obviously we want to create an upward spiral of positivity rather than a downward spiral of negativity. So we always start with the positive. So regardless of how it went, there must have been some things that were actually done well. Now, once I've exhausted that question and I've got enough answers on that, the next question that I'm going to ask is, what didn't go well? Now, again, no matter how effective and successful any project is, there's always something that perhaps didn't go as well as it could. So I'm asking the team to identify what those things might be. And so they will share that in the group. Now, this isn't a finger pointing exercise, and it's certainly not an opportunity to apportion blame. What I'm trying to do here is to establish a little bit of some benchmarks around the project and what we could do next time. So what I've effectively done here is I've talked about the positives and I've talked about the negatives in the project, which sets it up very nicely for the very last question. And the very last question is, what will we do differently next time? So this is our golden opportunity, while it's fresh in our minds, to actually ask the team how we could actually improve our project work. And I'm going to listen carefully to what people have got to say. Now, the reason why this is great to do straight after a project is it's fresh in everybody's mind. So it's very easy for people to reflect back on it and to consider some of the things that need to be done. Now, this works extremely well, and I'll tell you why, because the three exercises that I'm sharing with you today have one thing in common, and that is we are getting the team members to have skin in the game. We're getting them engaged in the problem solving. And there's an old saying that people don't argue with their own data. So what happens is that when you ask people, what can we do differently next time, which of course is the magic question in this exercise, the AAR, people in your team will commit to doing that. And they'll commit to doing whatever it is that you've come up with, because it's their information. It's not you. You're not. It comes back to that proactive paradox again. You're not imposing that on people. You're asking people for their feedback. And if there's general agreement in the room that something needs to be done differently, or maybe we go about it in a different way next time, then, and you're happy with that, I mean, you need to be happy with that, then fine. It's worthy of implementation. Now, unfortunately, what happens is a lot of organizations around the world use the after action review as a box ticking exercise. They use it as a quality assurance exercise. And unfortunately, when you use it in a formulaic way like that, it loses its magic. So it can be done spontaneously at the end of any project at all. Now, the other side of this, of course, is you can use this in the corridor in a one-on-one situation. So if one of your team members, for example, has done a challenging project and you want to debrief on that project, and this is brilliant online as well, then you can simply ask them, what did you do well? What didn't go well? And based on what you've told me, what would you do differently next time? And you know, a 5-minute debrief one-on-one with a person taking on a new project can be absolutely wonderful in terms of giving them that sense of accountability next time round. So use that exercise. We don't do enough debriefs in our workplace. I think part of it is we think it takes a long time. I think we also aren't convinced that it's going to make much difference. And I guess the third reason is there's another project there waiting in the wings to be attended to. So we just need to move on to the next thing. Now, I was doing some work with the police service not long ago, and a detective told me that when she goes to a murder investigation at a house and she's got her detectives there, she's a senior detective, she, without fail, when the investigation's been done, at least the preliminary investigation, when they're outside on the pavement just before they go home after probably a 16-hour day, she stops them before they go and they do a stand-up after action review. She asked them what went well in this investigation so far. Then she asked them what didn't go well. And next time we have a similar type of murder investigation, what will we do differently? So she does that while it's fresh in people's minds. And she tells me that it works brilliantly. It makes people accountable for, changes and procedures that might be required the next time round. So it's well worth the effort to try that. Now, the third one I want to share with you is a coaching methodology. Again, you may well have heard of it. It's called GROW. And the GROW stands for Goal, Reality, Options, and Way Forward. So just think about this. If you've got an office or you're online or whatever, and somebody wants to talk to you about a problem, a little bit more complex than just, should I do this or should I do that? So it's a bit of I don't mean a personal problem, I'm talking about a work-related problem. Now, before you launch into answering that, and remember, every single time you answer the question, you are reinforcing this proactive paradox that I've just been talking about. So you need to stop yourself and ask them 4 questions. And the first question is, what do you want to achieve? What are you trying to achieve here? So this gives you a big picture of where they want to go. And of course, if the person can't articulate to you what the big picture is, that's problematic. But what are you aiming to achieve? Now, once they've articulated what the outcome is that they want, then you ask them, well, what's the current state? Well, probably a better question is, what are the barriers getting in the way of you achieving that result? And I like to ask people, what's the one barrier that's getting in the way? Because there's probably several, and you don't want to be spending 45 minutes talking about everything and anything. So what's the one barrier that's getting in the way? And then the third question that you can ask them before is, you can say, okay, so what are your options? Now, don't be surprised if they say to you, well, that's why I'm coming to you. Just say, yes, but assuming I wasn't here, what are your options? And you'll notice it's plural. So what we're expecting is more than one answer. So the idea is for them to share a couple of options with you, at least. And that, of course, the more options, the more optimistic they are. And of course, the more accountable they'll be for the solution. And once they've shared a couple of options with you, as long as they're not completely ridiculous, then move on to the W. And the last question is, what do you need to do now? So literally in 4 questions, what I've been able to do is to empower the other person, make them accountable for what they're attempting to do. And all I've done is act as a sounding board, you see. So it's brilliant. But of course, we leaders get a sugar hit when we answer their question. So the moment you answer somebody's question, you are reinforcing the proactive paradox, because then you're training the other person to think, oh, well, whenever I've got a problem, all I've got to do is go to the boss, because the boss likes to answer my questions. The boss likes to solve my problems. The boss likes to take accountability for what I do. And this is problematic, of course. And then, of course, you will wonder why people aren't taking accountability. So, folks, there's 3 simple, easy to implement exercises that can help you. Now, the first one is done with the team. That is the whiteboard exercise with the 3 columns. The second exercise can be done with the team at the end of a project, or it can be done with an individual. And this third exercise, which is a coaching methodology, can be done one-on-one. Now, I've found a lot of leaders that I work with have written the letters GROW on their whiteboard in their office or wherever they are working, just to remind them that the next time somebody comes to talk to them about a problem, that they don't just launch into a solution. They give it. Sorry, I've been doing a lot of talking. You don't just launch into a solution. You actually are going to give them the onus of accountability. So they're three things that I strongly recommend that you try. Now, next Friday, I have another. By the way, for those of you that don't know, every Friday morning, at least in Brisbane time, we have a short, sharp session on one aspect of my books. Next week, we're going to talk about providing feedback remotely, which is often a challenge. So if you find that challenging, then the reason it's a challenge is pretty simple. You're not there at the time and you can only see the end results. So if you'd like to learn more about how you might go about sharing, creating shared purpose and giving feedback remotely, then you're more than welcome to register for that webinar. And you'll see at the bottom there, it's on Friday, October 22. This is Brisbane time, 10 a.m. Now, if you're interstate or overseas, obviously that'll be a different time zone. So it's a Australian Eastern Standard Time. You will notice there is a link and you just click on that link. Now, I'll be sending you a copy of the slides and the recording, so you'll get a chance to be able to register for that webinar, and indeed any webinar on the Friday. You're more than welcome. All right, so one last thing before I go. I said I had a special offer, and I do. If you are interested in pre-ordering my book, Breaking the Proactive Paradox, then just send me an email. Just respond to me by the close of business today. And instead of the normal $40 plus postage, my price will be $30 with postage. And if you send me that you're interested in purchasing that, you can pay for that. I will sign that for you and get it sent out to you hot off the press before it's out there on Amazon and all the other places. Okay, so in fact, it is on Amazon at the moment, but it's on, and you can go to Amazon if you want, but you'll get the electronic version. The paper version isn't available yet. So that's open to you if you'd like to take advantage of that. All right, so folks, that's pretty much it from me. And if you've got any questions or comments, I'm always open to hearing your thoughts about the topics that I cover. Just send me an email. I'm happy to converse with you via email. Just because we've got half an hour, we can't really open this up to a big discussion. It's pretty much me giving you some information for you to go away and think about. So I'm done. So thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing you potentially next Friday. And if you're interested in a copy of the book, send me an email and I'll sort that out for you. And we will catch up and have a wonderful weekend. And remember, as I say every time, stay positive, because leaders are in the business of bringing their best self to work every day. And I think this is really important. Thanks, everyone. We'll catch you in a week. Thank you and goodbye.